Jason Voorhees makes his first real appearance in Friday the 13th Part 2. After the revenge killings perpetrated by his mother and her eventual death at the hands of Alice Hardy, the lake finally seemed safe again. Friday the 13th Part 2 checks back in with Alice, months after her ordeal at the lake. She becomes suspicious of noises in her apartment and is eventually killed by an unseen person after finding Pamela Voorhees' head in a fridge. The film later goes on to focus on a group of counsellors at Crystal Lake and of course their eventual deaths at the hands of this unseen antagonist. Part 2 marks Jason Voorhees' first true showing in the franchise. Whilst he made a cameo in the stinger ending of Part 1, he was never truly visualised into his actual adult form until this movie. The crew behind the movie initially intended to create a franchise that had different killers for every film, so each could work as a standalone slasher, but for some reason Jason Voorhees stuck. The film of course focuses on elements that would become a staple in the series. Teenagers engaging in debauchery and hedonistic acts, all whilst being stalked and picked off one by one by an unseen entity, with Jason mostly only visualised by shoes or a hand, with his actual reveal being saved for much later in the film. Jason has lived in the woods since his presumed death, and in both shame and embarrassment from his disfigurement that caused his near-death experience, crafted himself a crude mask of a burlap sack, tied with a rope around the neck and a rudimentary eye hole cut out of the fabric. It is unknown how he survived drowning, or how his mother didn't know he was alive, or why Jason didn't just return to the camp, but perhaps these questions could be answered by certain elements in later films. Speaking of Jason's mother, the phrase ki 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 ma 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 returns to this film's soundtrack. Recorded on an Exaplex delay device, this phrase is derived from "kill for mother", Jason's internal mantra and reasoning for killing the counsellors. Jason clearly knows who killed his mother, as he killed Alice at the start of the film, and thus he is carrying on his mother's legacy of keeping Camp Crystal Lake closed by killing anybody who dares to visit. Jason eventually whittles down the counsellors to Paul and Ginny. Whilst escaping through the woods, the latter stumbles upon Jason's hut, which is also visualised in the game. She finds an altar to his mother, Pamela, with the centrepiece of her sweater and decapitated head. Ginny dons the sweater and talks Jason down, another element that could be seen in the game, acting as his mother and pacifying him for a brief moment until he sees his mother's head, at which point Ginny brings a machete down onto Jason's shoulder, cutting deep into his flesh and seemingly killing him. Jason's willingness to believe that Ginny is his mother indicates a lack of basic understanding of people, relationships and general concepts. This could explain why Jason never returned to camp or to his mother, or it could be a side effect of something else we'll look at when the time is right. Finally, Paul and Ginny return to the cabin, whereupon all seems well until a now unmasked Jason bursts through the window and grabs Ginny. The movie eventually ends with her being loaded onto an ambulance, with the whereabouts of Paul being unknown. The movie then shows Pamela's head on top of the altar, with Jason unseen. This again can be visualised somewhat in the game. This section properly introduces the concept of Jason being more than just a man. Though he may show tendencies towards fear, stealth and apprehension throughout the film, Jason has now survived both drowning and what would be for any normal person surely a fatal wound. This plants the seeds for the undying killer concept, which would later go on to characterise Jason Voorhees. Part 2 Jason is an imposing figure. He stands tall and broad and is able to move at a surprising speed and strike out with a strength that is surprising even for a man of his stature. He also strikes from the shadows a lot more in this film, preferring to bide his time before striking. These elements translate well into the game, with Part 2 Jason having strength in both a fast run speed, extra traps and the ability to morph around the map faster than usual. Jason however has a weaker defence in the game, which characterises his more human side seen in the movie, seeing as Jason clearly shows a certain amount of fear when he is confronted with a chainsaw in the movie. These gameplay elements have been handpicked to make Part 2 Jason in the game as close as possible to his movie counterpart. That was the history of Part 2 Jason. Do leave a like if you enjoyed and check out the channel whilst you're there. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on the road to 10k, and check back soon when we'll be looking at Part 3 Jason and his history. Thanks for watching, I'll see you soon.